Hello, I'm David Dubato, and you're watching the No Delusion Zone on Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. And my very special guest today is my good friend, Jonathan Fink. Jonathan is, among many other things, a beau vivant and creator and host of Silicon Curtain. There's no need to introduce him any longer. We've talked a lot. So, Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm okay. A little bit frazzled because we're talking just off air. I only got back from Lviv late last night, and
Yeah.
I know 2 days in Lviv, 2 days on the road. At my age, that's quite a commitment, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say some old vaudeville joke where you were to say, "I just flew in from Lviv, and boy, are my arms tired." Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you would physically have to fly in Lviv because, of course, there is no functioning airport.
No, it's not. No.
Which actually is an interesting question. Let's start with that. Why hasn't Ukraine actually opened an airstrip right next to the Polish border, which would
Tell
have
me.
saved an awful lot of hassle and
Yeah.
reduced the dependence on Poland? Which, let's face it, Poland is not particularly well disposed at the moment to Ukraine, and the border processes are, let's say, fairly horrific and at times for Ukrainians at least humiliating. So, an airstrip heavily defended near the border would have been quite a good thing to do, but alas, it wasn't.
What's the answer to that? I mean, you've been in and out of Ukraine a lot in the last, years, like 3, 4 years. Why haven't they opened the airport around Lviv for the reasons that you just stated? Why not? It would be a very
No
big
one knows.
plus
No
to
one knows.
them.
One assumes that there's not the political will, or the costs are seen as prohibitive, or perhaps they don't feel they have the air defense, or that it will become an instant target for Russia. Well, of course it would, but let's face it, the airports in Moscow are still semi-functioning, and that's on massive drone fire. So it's not beyond the wit of man to do that. I'm guessing it's run into the normal kind of internecine Ukrainian politics, but it would have saved many millions of people a lot of hassle to be able to fly to Europe, for instance. Um, and it would potentially have meant a lot of displaced Ukrainians might actually have tentatively come back, as well as making all sorts of logistics, business investment, maybe even some nascent tourism into Lviv. It could have brought a lot of currency into the country. So I can't tell you why it hasn't been done. It seems like a really major missed opportunity, including think of the number of entrepreneurs who are now working with drone tech. If they were able to actually fly into Lviv to meet their partners in, let's say, joint sort of military ventures, etc., military applications as well as commercial, that would be a huge boost for the economy and the war economy. But all I have to do is shrug and say I have no idea why that wasn't done.
Well, again, since you just came through that area and you've done it many, many times before, for those on my channel who are not aware of the current political crisis between Ukraine and Poland, could you summarize what's going on there?
Sure. I mean, the distances from Lviv to whether it be Krakow or Lublin are not that far. Even Warsaw is not, is a couple of hours by train, 4 hours by 3 hours by train, etc. You can easily be stuck at the border. I mean, this time I decided to go on foot, and that worked out quite well because the journey across the border, the physical border bit on the way out took me just 20 minutes, which is unheard of. It's extraordinary. I just incredibly lucky that there was no one there, and we walked all the way through. On the way back, yesterday, it took 2 hours just standing to get through the Polish side. They seem to deliberately understaff all the points to cause huge, fairly miserable queues. Um, and Ukrainians are extremely tolerant. They're extremely patient. They don't moan and stand around moaning and complaining as say Brits would in a similar circumstance. The children typically are very well behaved and don't cause chaos. Again, if this was Britain, it would be absolute freaking bedlam. But that seems to be quite a good way to get across. This is Shimisil. People will tell me I've pronounced that all wrong. Shimisil. It's one of those Polish words that has like 15 L's and Z's and Y's in it. It's impossible to spell, and really. But I've heard the trains can take hours. I've had 6 hour waits on the border in trains. My last coach trip, I took the coach out from Lviv to Warsaw on the not this trip, the previous one. We were stuck at the border for 8 hours. 8 freaking hours in a coach just waiting for our turn across. And that was in the middle of the night. So honestly, there's no good way to get across. But it seems the pedestrian crossing gives you the best chance of nipping in and nipping out. But even then, you still have to deal with taxis and trains and buses on both sides of the border. It's still a hassle. Someone's recommended to me actually trying a Polish route and then coming into Ivano-Frankivsk. I haven't tried that. Could be a good one. The route between Chisinau and Odessa is not too bad, especially if you can get a private car or taxi. That's a really quick border crossing, and you're just like 3 hours from one end to the other, and you're in the middle of Odessa. But of course, Odessa's being hammered very badly right now, as is Kharkiv, which is where I was recently, and Kiev. They've changed the tactics. Now they have volleys of ballistics because they fly in, and one, I think they are genuinely more difficult to detect, but two, Ukraine has absolute, I don't know how much to say here, but I've seen it in print. So, but it does seem that to track ballistics, Ukraine has dependency, let's say, on some of its allies. I don't know how much of that data is getting through to them on ballistics. I just don't know. But they are more difficult to track. So previously, they would have decoy drones to attrit air defense, and then drones coming in, and then ballistics would come in once some of the air defense is tested and attritted. So you'd already have a trevога, you'd have an air alert going off because the slower moving drones would trigger it. So when the ballistics arrived, it's already in the context of people having gone to shelters. Now Russians know that the interceptors for ballistics are low stocked or very low stocked. And at one point, we suspect they didn't have any because when they first changed these tactics, I was in Kiev, it was about a week and a half ago. You heard booms, like no air alert. You just suddenly heard impact explosions. From nothing, with no warning. This is obviously no time to get to shelters or even into corridors. As Ukrainian helpfully told me yesterday, if you hear the ballistic, it doesn't have your name on it, which is terrifying. Because, of course, the noise, in a country where there are no airplanes flying, where you suddenly hear something that sounds like a private jet going over your head, literally is what it sounds like some kind of super fast turbojet, flying over your head. When you hear that, and you immediately think, it's an aeroplane, and then your brain sort of kicks in and says there are no aeroplanes. You just realize that a zircon or a kinjal has just literally skimmed your building. Well, probably not, but it's certainly gone close to you. If you've heard it, it means somebody else is in the firing line.
Well, the reason from my understanding is that why that's happening, you mentioned Odessa, is because Russia is absolutely flushing out all or most of their ballistic missile force. They're doing this for obvious reasons. They're really trying to demoralize the Ukrainians. And as most people know who follow me or you, the Ukrainians are way down on their stockpile of Patriot missiles. That is the only valid or surefire defense anywhere against
not
ballistic
even way
missiles.
down. I think at points they're literally
they have none.
They have none, which was the case a week and a half ago, because they had a 0% interception rate on that first night where the pattern of attack changed. And the other thing is they'll send in a volley of ballistics, and then they'll have a pause for a couple of hours, just letting people maybe drift back home, go to sleep, and then they send another, and then they wait a few hours, and they send another. That first night of attack is unlike any other through the course of the whole war, in that there were no drones at all. There were just 4 separate volleys, I think it was, or 3 or 4 separate volleys of ballistics, timed several hours apart, and there was a 0% interception. The last couple of raids, the interception rates crept up, I believe, to sort of 30 to 40% or so. So somehow they've got some interceptors from somewhere, whether it's Europe, whether it's Patriot stocks from Europe, or we just don't know. Maybe somebody does, but I haven't seen the exact information on what the state of stocks are.
I'm going to definitely get into some Russian bashing here in just a moment, but I want to circle around back to the question: what is the origin right now of the political crisis between Ukraine and Poland? It goes back to World War II. And Zelensky, because I've written a series of articles recently in podcasts zeroing in on some of the, in my my words, boneheaded moves that Zelensky's made. And I'm a real fan of President Zelensky, but I think he's made some, how shall we say, errors in judgment. And,
There are.
you know,
I mean, the question, though, I would
but
throw
the
in
Polish,
there,
issue has to do with the giving an award to a Ukrainian unit that really rubbed the Poles the wrong way, and they are going crazy over this.
Not just going crazy, of course. Russian propaganda may have already been primed for this because they've been trying to create those divisions for years. But there is a huge, huge investment. So I'd ask several questions here. One is why the Poles are reacting so viscerally and not able to take a little step back and rationalize it a little bit. I'd also inject into here a couple of complications. And unfortunately, there are some people in Poland who really do nuance and are saying, come on, calm down, we have a common enemy. And also, I think I've got a couple of Polish friends who are saying, look, history is one for, despite Zelensky making a mistake, actually the realm of discussing these things and dealing with these things should be down to academics and historians, not in the populist arena, political arena, and certainly not being used as a political football. So we have some issues there on both sides. But I would throw this in here. Zelensky is exhausted. Zelensky recently lost his chief of staff, and he has some junior people around him. He has ideas being thrown at him continuously from all angles, and he has a junior team. I'm pretty sure. Now, the Poles have taken this incredibly politically and incredibly personally. They think that this is a move that was designed to piss them off. Let's say it that way. I really don't think that's the case.
I don't believe that at all.
Zelensky even really thought for 1 second about what impact it would have on Poland. I don't think he really looked at this in any sense. It was just an idea placed in front of him, and he was like, that sounds great, off we go, boom, boom. And it's probably one of 100 things that cross his desk in a given day. And he neither has the bandwidth, nor at this point in the war where he's completely physically and mentally exhausted. Let's put it out there. I don't think he thought about the impact for 1 second. Now, that's not good, of course, in a leader. But also, there's a funny Polish kind of Ukrainian thing going on here, which is the Poles are demanding that Ukrainians rightly look at the bad stuff in history. Many in Poland, it's not reciprocal in that, to an extent, Ukrainians do look at that, and some Ukrainians are very aware that there's some bad stuff here, which needs to be examined. And indeed, the exhumations of Volyn and so on are being expedited by Zelensky and moving forward. So you've got to say that this is not that there isn't a major block to this historical examination going on. On the Polish side, however, there seems to be almost no awareness and no desire whatsoever to look into the bad stuff that their guys did. Because let's be completely frank here. I mean, Poland, even now, there are those in Poland who have imperial aspirations, as weird as it sounds. This is a real thing. And certainly on the conservative nationalist right, it's seen as something of a rallying cry. Conservative Polish ethnic theocratic nationalism is an extremely vibrant and unfortunately quite a destabilizing and dangerous force. Poland wants to be or certain people rather in Poland want to be the hegemonic power of the region. That means that mentally they're thinking of Ukraine as subordinate to them. They're thinking probably of the Baltics, Romania and other states as subordinate to them. Maybe that even includes Hungary, who knows? This is not a modern way of thinking about regional relations and not a modern way of thinking about it, but it is politically inflammatory. And unfortunately, what the Ukrainians understand is that they don't want to have a hegemon of anyone, whether it's the EU, Poland, Russia, or anyone, even including the United States and Britain. They do not want to be subordinate to anyone. And they now, I think, realize that they have the strength and the ingenuity in the economy to not have to be dependent on anyone. Ukraine is not seeking to dominate anyone. And I have met people who are far more nationalist, not on the sort of Nazi spectrum. I've never met the so-called Nazis, but I have met people who are on this extreme nationalist
How
side.
about gay Nazi fascists in Ukraine? Never met any
Yeah,
of those?
no, never met a a denazified or a Nazified.
I'm
No,
shocked.
they just
Yeah.
don't exist. They just don't
Okay.
exist.
All right.
Even though you will get a lot of people, I would say, with far more extreme nationalist views in Britain, France, Germany,
Oh, sure.
Belgium, United States, and so that's not really a thing. That's just Russian propaganda.
Well,
But
from
there
when you,
there is a strong nationalist sentiment, but it's not seeking to dominate anyone. It's just like, we're here, we got a big country full of nice things, and we want it to stay that way
well,
and
what you're
improve.
saying about
That's
Poland,
pretty much
I mean,
it.
this sounds like they're harking back to what was it, the Polish-Lithuanian Empire,
Yes,
many
there is a
300,
certain nostalgia.
400 years
Yes,
ago or more.
correct, correct.
That's insane. But look,
Yeah.
I just want
The
to say,
Russians understand this, right? The
oh
Russians are
yeah,
clever.
oh
They've been
yeah,
beating on this drum since the start of the
sure,
war,
sure,
knowing that there is a deep-seated chip on the shoulder in Poland,
yeah.
which actually does not exist in Ukraine, which
Well,
is really
I just
fascinating.
want to say that out of all the mistakes that Zelensky may or may not have made, this was not one of the most egregious, because it's
It's not the
probably like
most
you
egregious.
said,
Yeah.
he's exhausted and he's got
Yeah.
so many advisors that are new that throw out all these ideas to him. And this was
No.
not the best idea.
No.
And he went with it. It was not done intentionally. It was not done to
No.
drive a wedge between Ukraine and Poland. And I agree with you.
It was not.
The Poles, whoever they are, the Polish people or leaders that are using this at,
Yeah.
that is being enhanced, I should say, by Russia, are
Yeah.
crazy. The main enemy here is Russia, not historic grievances against
Yeah.
Ukraine. That's just,
And it could have been
crazy.
dealt with diplomatically and
Yes,
academically.
behind closed doors. I'm sorry.
Behind closed doors, they could even push back in a strongly worded diplomatic
Yes.
statement. But people are sort of, it's like sharks smelling blood. There's a lot of people who feel that they can gain political kudos and power and leverage from this. And I think, unfortunately, many of them know that they have Russian resource, which will pile in and amplify their views.
Sure.
This is the most cynical and danger. If you think you're a patriot, and you're prepared to build your political profile knowing that Russia has invested in propaganda and digital media to enhance your position, I would argue you are not a patriot. You are a traitor to your country. Interestingly, Laura Loomer is saying exactly this right now. Exactly this. If you have knowingly taken Russian money directly, or you have benefited indirectly from them enhancing or building your platform, you are a traitor. Simple as that.
Well, I don't want to keep beating up on Poland, although you deserve it right now, Poland. I'm not going to keep doing that.
Last one I should say, there's a lot of hate crimes against Ukrainians that are now popping up all over Poland. Now, from what I've heard, the police and courts seem to be dealing with these in a manner you'd expect from a civilized and sophisticated state, which Poland is, which is good to hear. But the very fact that you have this sort of sporadic hate crime against Ukrainians is deeply worrying. And there was a case of a child, and there's several cases actually of children being beaten.
Just for speaking Ukrainian.
Just for speaking Ukrainian. And 2% of the Polish economy is now directly dependent on Ukrainian refugees and business people who've relocated there. So it's
Jonathan,
not only is it...
This is insane. They're shooting themselves in the foot because, if they continue to amplify the Russian propaganda, it's going to hurt them. Not just Ukraine. They are feeding into this. So this is insane. They should swallow their historic grievances for now. Recall the damn Ukrainian ambassador if you want. Lambaste him or her behind closed doors and get on with pursuing the war against Russia. Damn it. I'm sorry. That's the way it should be. And it pisses me off that they're not looking at it that way.
That's it. And last word on that. And they can and should and actually are expediting the exhumations.
Yes.
And put more resources into an actual dispassionate historical commission. A commission maybe between Ukraine and seek to find a way through rather than inflame. But that's not what's happening. And I would say the last thing here is that you have to look at some on the extreme nationalist side in Poland. Who are their heroes? Well, unfortunately, they have a couple of heroes who are lauded by the nationalist right in Poland, who are directly implicated in massacres of Ukrainians. So I'm sorry, it's like this cuts both ways.
Yes,
I'm not a huge supporter actually of the so-called pantheon of heroes, but I'm not going to dictate to Ukraine who they nominate as their heroes. I just encourage people to sort of look at the reality of these things and the warts and all of history, but that cuts on both sides.
Well, it just really angers me that, and I don't care what country you're talking about, including my own, that people don't have enough common sense to come together, put their historic grievances aside, whatever they are, and unite against the common enemy, whether it's fascists at home, whether it's the Russian aggression against Ukraine and all of Europe, actually, or whatever.
We know who the enemy is. I mean,
yes.
My God, yes.
Yeah. As Pogo would say, and he's us, but that's Pogo, the cartoon. He's not us. It's the Russian aggression. One last point on Russia, and then I want to get back to the UK, where you've got some news, actually.
I missed it.
You must have missed it. You were out of the country. And here's the thing, and I'm not the only one to say this, but I know we've talked about this before. This is not Putin's war. This is Russia's war, including the Russian people specifically. And I just want to throw this out there and get your comments, and then we'll move on to what's going on in England right now. The war against Ukraine will not end until it will not end because the Russian people think that their tactics are wrong. No, the war will only end when Russia is soundly defeated on the battlefield and or Putin leaves office. But that alone, Putin's leaving office through whatever means is not going to solve it. Russia needs to be drubbed. They need to be soundly defeated militarily before the Russian people will agree to stop the aggression against Ukraine. Agree? Disagree?
Absolutely, 100% agree. I had this conversation with a guy called Alexander Nevzorov almost 2 years ago, and he had a simple phrase: "This doesn't end until someone puts a bullet between Putin's eyes." Literally. He's not going to leave office willingly. No. And if he does, he will not just let people get on with the job. He has to be dead for any change to occur or for the war to finish. This is quite clear, I think, to those who have I would say, clear-sighted understanding of Russia. What is also apparent, really, and it's been apparent, I think we were talking about this over the last year or even two, that Russians generally, and I'm going to talk, in broad terms here, they prize what they think of security, but it's not security in our sense. It's their, place at the trough. They prize their privilege over anything. And privilege and security in this case are two things, because security in Russia is access to resource. Access to resource is only possible if you are completely compliant with the regime, show your loyalty by repeating its propaganda, and have no active, oppositional stance. But it's worse than that. Most Russians who do have some form of trotter in the trough, frankly, are either completely ignorant or ignorant by choice, or absolutely indifferent to what happens in Ukraine and what their state does. So I'll say this plainly for the audience. Most Russians, even the ones that decry the war, would do literally nothing to stop it. But that's up to and including if Russia were to win, take all of Ukraine, kill every single Ukrainian, and then divide the spoils amongst its population. I can guarantee that no one in Russia would physically object to that by opposing it. There are a few individuals who are brave, who have stood up and have gone to jail. There are some that might be a little bit squeamish about it, but essentially a full genocide and a Nazi-scale erasure of the Ukrainian people would go almost completely unopposed by the Russian population. Therefore, the only way to end it is to kill the Tsar, demigod who started it, plus deny Russians the thing that they prize most, which is their privilege and their resources and their convenience. This, finally, is why Ukraine is destroying the wild berries and other infrastructure. Yes, it has dual military use. Yes, it can be fully justified within the rules of war because those networks are used as logistics networks. That is not 100% why Ukraine is doing this. Let's be kind of clear here. I think hopefully they've been watching our podcasts and come to this realization. They know that the only way this war stops is to deny the comfort and privilege of every Russian citizen who lives in the luxury cities of Moscow, St.
Inconvenience those
Petersburg,
sons of bitches.
completely inconvenience them, destroy their luxury lives, destroy any sense of security, and destroy their access to resources, wealth, and privilege. There is no other way to end this, and there is nothing else apart from doing that that would motivate any of them to kill Putin. This
Yeah.
is the fact of it.
Yeah,
It has to go a lot further. They have to freeze their asses off and starve
yes.
in their apartments
Yes.
before anything will change. I'm being really blunt here.
Yeah.
Only those things, hunger, freezing to death in their apartments,
Yep.
will cause any change in Russia whatsoever.
I agree. That's why I keep saying too, and I know you agree, that the death of Putin or leaving office is not in and of itself going to not only stop the war, it's not going to change the attitude of the Russian people. It's only going to be an utter and total defeat and collapse of Russian society. And I know how that sounds, and I don't care. Because look what has been happening to Ukraine all these years. I should worry about the sensitivity of the Russian people. Anybody that looks at the internet, social media, looks at all the newer videos about how the Russians are now complaining about the fact they have to wait 2 hours for gas. You know, and then when
asking what did we ever do to anyone?
What did we ever do? Why do we deserve this? You know, how can we live through something like this? How can you live through something like this? Enough. I could go on.
But it's also strategic. For those who think we're Russophobic, madmen, this is entirely strategic. This does not end until, as you say, not only the bulk of the population are inconvenienced, but also the nationalist elite and the little sort of like the matryoshka doll of Putin's that are following Putin. All of them have to realize absolutely. You may never convince them that erasing Ukraine is not is not something they shouldn't heartily desire, because they will carry on desiring it. They all have to understand that it is impractical and that they don't have the strength to do it. It's entirely strategic from a European perspective as well, because if Putin carries on, and if the measures we've talked about aren't enacted, he will eventually attack Europe. He will decide that if he can't take Ukraine now, he needs to take something. And that something is, unfortunately, Europe, which is not geared up to defend itself against a large-scale, let's say, drone provocation or hybrid war, which is not. He could trash the European economy as his next step. And it's actually fairly likely.
I'm going to go one step beyond what we both just said, which is the elimination of Putin and the total defeat of the Russian military. I'm going to say that above and beyond that, those two things have to happen. But after that, they need to be held accountable. There needs to be a Nuremberg-style trial. Investigation and invest, not only investigation, go to prison in The Hague. The International Criminal Court. And that's been approved. I mean, again, the Ukrainians have been working with. Go ahead.
Your country has now made it its core national security policy to destroy the International Criminal Court.
No, I understand that. No, I don't even want to talk about that. That's a whole other issue.
That's another conversation.
The fact of the matter is, it still stands what I said, that this will not be complete, and we can never totally discard or discount another Russia rising, even after the Russian military defeat, if they are not held accountable, a la Nuremberg. There has to be hearings and trials of these people. They have to go to prison and or be executed, depending on the crime and the conviction. I'm sorry. And of course, then reparations have to be made, but that's a whole other.
And if you can't arrest them, it has to happen in absentia, so that these people can't attend any international forums, that they will spend the rest of their lives risking arrest and extradition, and that Russia remains a pariah.
Or send in the SAS and the BND and all these people and extradite their ass that way. Extradition. Look,
if it doesn't happen, it's guaranteed.
It's going to happen again.
It's guaranteed that Russia will invade within the next decade and will probably invade Europe. Guaranteed.
And just a few minutes that we have left, actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact you've got a new prime minister, Andy.
Every time I leave the country, there's like a new prime minister.
They're waiting for you to leave, Jonathan. So they can sneak a new prime minister in there. The eighth prime minister. Is it the seventh? I forget.
Someone joked that actually that happens in both countries. I arrive in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian prime minister is sacked.
Yes.
And and while I'm away, the British one
I read
changes.
that they were
And
going to do a
actually,
swap, but it didn't work out.
yeah, no,
No,
we don't
sorry.
want
In any event,
that.
okay, Andy Burnham, he's the new PM there, and
Yeah.
he's he had I guess a good first day. But old Neil Farage, remember him? He's not happy. He's already calling for a new general election. What do you
Yeah,
think?
well, of course he would. He's made that clear. It's obvious why he would. He, however, has his own little challenge in that he inadvisedly called a by-election. He thought he'd be going head to head with these disorganized parties, Labour and Conservatism, etc. He thought it would be able to, and he's mired in financial scandals,
Yeah,
absolutely mired in it. Any other politician, it would have destroyed him by now. Unfortunately, it's Teflon Farage. He has the same kind of qualities as Trump in that it seems that shit doesn't stick to him, or his shit doesn't smell the same way as everybody else's does. Even so, he thought he'd have this by-election, he'd romp home, and he'd be able to just sort of then breeze through these scandals. While all the other parties pulled out, he is now in a head-to-head race with Count Binface. I don't know if you've
yes,
been following that.
yes.
And it's a non-zero
That
chance
sounds
that
like
Count
Count
Binface.
McBoatface, that they named a boat after several years ago, and some kind of a challenge,
Yeah.
Bodie McBoatface or something. But
Yeah,
anyway,
both
go
in
ahead, I'm
both face.
sorry.
But Count Binface has a non-zero chance of
Face.
winning. I mean, he actually has a chance of winning,
Yeah.
which would be a wonderful. A lot of people are bemoaning it that it trivializes a democracy. I think it enhances
Doesn't he
democracy.
dress in a clown suit or a barrel or some crazy
He
thing?
dresses in a bin liner. He
Okay,
dresses in a bin liner with
excellent.
a head that looks a bit like a dustbin
That's
or a trash
outstanding.
can. Yeah, it's
I would love to
outstanding.
see him in office. Yeah.
And if he wins against a Kremlin agent, which is what I believe Farage is, certainly, he gets back to the start of the conversation. Anyone who has either directly, knowingly taken Russian money or benefited from amplification of their platform through digital means, etc., is a traitor. Now, I can't say with certainty that Farage has directly taken money from Russia. Well, he has via Russia Today. He appeared 18 times on Russia Today, and he received undisclosed fees for doing so. He's admitted that he received fees. He said it was the usual consultancy fee for such an appearance. That, I think, is probably a lie. We don't know the final amounts. They could be huge. So directly he's benefited from a relationship with Russia prior to the full-scale war.
Andy Burnham, in the last few moments we have left, your predictions. He's brand new, 24 hours in office or less. What are your predictions? How's he going to do?
Idea. I have no idea. I mean, he has said that his first two calls were with Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky.
Yeah.
So I'm greatly heartened by that prioritization. That is a good start. And of course, the last thing that Keir Starmer did in office was visit Ukraine. He was criticized for not visiting Ukraine in the first year of his tenure. The fact that it's the last thing he did speaks, I think, to his character. It's a move of great strength and great probity, and I applaud that. I'm hoping that we have continuity on Ukraine, that we have continuity of the strength of our support for Ukraine. I mean, we're no longer, let's say, a cash-rich country, and we underspend on defence. We perhaps underspend on the support we should be providing for Ukraine. But there's no question that the moral support is there. The political support is far stronger from Britain and amongst the population than almost any other country. That, I think, hopefully will have continuity on that. Ukrainians appreciate it. I was just at an event this weekend where there were a lot of serving commanders and veterans. All of them came up and said that the support of Britain and just even the moral support that is absolutely priceless and it is a fantastic boost to them. The fact that Russian narratives do not get as much traction in Britain as they do in other countries is massively appreciated by Ukraine. Of course, we could do doing more, but that is something. I expect continuity on that. As to the rest, I'll just give you one little throwaway line here. Unless he comes to grips with our relationship with Europe, then he will probably go the way that everybody else has, because this is the elephant in the room. Our economy is at least 8% smaller than it would have been if we'd carried on within the European community. And to those who say, oh, well, it was a great advantage, in terms of COVID. It was a great advantage in terms of supporting Ukraine. I'm afraid to say we pretty much could have done both those things, and Europe caught up pretty fast on the vaccine thing. And we could have supported Ukraine in the way we're supporting if we were in there. So those are straw man arguments. Unfortunately, our economy is anemic as a result of having left. Russia applauds that. Russia was involved in amplifying and making it more likely that the Brexit vote went that way. And they thought this would be a killer blow. I mean, fortunately, it not entirely. And we've repaired some of those bridges with Europe, but we need to fix that relationship. We need a strategic commercial relationship with Europe if we are going to start growing again. And if Biden can't address that, then unfortunately we will have more of the same political chaos. That's just a fact.
Last question, and you can wrap it up with this. Will he, unlike Starmer, be able to stand up to Donald Trump?
No idea. Honestly, no idea. The question at this point is whether standing up to him is the best way to get things done. I mean, Zelensky went into the Oval Office and stood his ground. That unfortunately set back relations by a year or more. And at this point, really, the best thing we can hope for is that the US is neutral. There was a real risk that they were pushed into the arms of Russia under Trump. Now it seems it's they're back on the fence theoretically about which side to back. The best thing we can hope for is that the US just starts a war somewhere else,
Just
rather
goes
than
away.
one with us. Yeah. Leave
Just
Greenland
goes-
alone, leave Europe
Yeah.
alone, don't start any more trade wars, do what you need to do, and we just all ride it out. So at this
Take
point,
your
I'm
ball
not
and
sure.
glove and go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm not sure confrontation is the right way. I mean, appeasement is not the right way
No,
either.
no.
But
Yeah.
direct confrontation does not change anything vis-a-vis this, and there's no one around Trump. I think it's engaging with people like Loomer and so on who are prepared, at least it seems, to change their minds. So I would say a kind of tactical engagement where it might deliver results is the best we can hope for. And yeah, if you can get some stuff done and avoid the worst consequences of Trump's ire, then maybe that's the best we can hope for the next year or two. I mean, my priority is Ukraine,
No, I
and
understand.
what we
True.
need, what Ukraine needs rather, is more interceptors, and that's it. And if we can get more interceptors, then well, that's a separate episode because Iran's kicking off. But again,
Yeah, and in fact,
as we
we
said
didn't
it
have
would,
time,
but
but I
no,
because I actually have to go. But next time, and promise me you're going to come
yeah,
back soon. We didn't even touch on the political stuff that's going on, the reshuffling of the
oh
Ukrainian regime, and we didn't even talk about Iran, which I do want to talk
yeah.
about. So
I call it
I have.
administration rather than regime in Ukraine, but that's
Well, yeah, no, I mean,
that's a
there's just a
choice
lot
of
of
words. Yeah,
stuff going on. A lot, some stuff I think is great, some stuff not
yeah,
so great. But I
yeah,
do want to
sure.
talk about it. I do have to go.
Me
But
too, me too.
let's get
But this has
you
been
back
great.
on soon, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Again, Jonathan Fink from Silicon Curtain. Thank you very much, and we will talk again soon, sir.
definitely look forward to it.
Okay, cheers.